Welcome to another deep dive into one of history's really dark chapters, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Today we're going to explore the life of Irma Grese, an SS guard whose actions in the camps earned her names like the Hyena of Auschwitz and the Beast of Belsen.
Yeah.
Um, so heavy stuff. But, understanding figures like Grese, I think, is unsettlingly relevant even today.
Absolutely. It's easy to just label her a monster and kind of wash our hands of it.
Right.
But I think that really doesn't help us understand how someone becomes capable of that kind of cruelty.
Exactly. And to help us unpack this a little bit, we've got two sources today.
Okay.
We've got excerpts from Irma Grese's Wikipedia page and an article titled Irma Grese, Terroria de la Auschwitz-Bergen-Belsen,
All right.
both packed with details about her life and her actions.
And what's interesting is that even with these sources, she still remains a bit of an enigma.
Yeah.
There's this strange duality to her persona that makes it hard to really kind of fit her into any one simple box.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning with her early life. Irma Grese was born in Germany in 1923.
Right.
Now, her childhood was anything but peaceful.
Yeah.
Her mother tragically committed suicide when Grese was just 12 years old after discovering her husband's infidelity.
Oh, wow. So that's
Yeah.
a lot for a young girl
Yeah, I can only imagine.
to go through at that age.
It's a traumatic event for any child to experience. And, you have to wonder how it shaped her development.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can only imagine the sort of scars that leaves psychologically and emotionally.
And then on top of that, she also had a strained relationship with her father,
Okay.
who, and this is where it gets interesting, actually opposed the Nazi regime.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's almost like this cruel twist of fate
Hmm.
that his own daughter would become a key figure
Yeah.
in the very system that he detested.
That's a fascinating contradiction, and it seems like that tension kind of follows her throughout her life.
Right.
You know, she drops out of school at 14, drifts between jobs,
Yeah.
and she faces even more disapproval from her father when she starts working at the Hohenleichen Sanatorium, which notably was a place where SS personnel were treated.
It's almost like she was rebelling in a way,
Yeah.
pushing back against the one person who was supposed to guide her.
Pushing back against her father, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's also important to note, I think, that at Hohenleichen, Grese really got her first taste of the Nazi medical world.
Oh, wow.
She worked there under Karl Gebhardt, who later became pretty notorious
Okay.
for his horrific medical experiments on prisoners at Ravensbrück.
So even before setting foot in the camp herself, she's exposed to this really dark underbelly of Nazi ideology.
Exactly. And there's even some suggestion in the sources that she may have assisted Gebhardt
Oh, really?
in those experiments at Ravensbrück,
Wow.
directly participating in the torture and suffering inflicted on prisoners.
It's a chilling thought.
It is a chilling thought.
And did those experiences desensitize her to violence?
Potentially. I mean, it's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
but it definitely puts her on a path, you know?
Yeah, was it like a casual descent into darkness?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question worth pondering, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Because she ends up at Ravensbrück in 1942.
Okay.
Initially, she was denied entry because she was underage, but eventually she gets in and she becomes an Officerin.
No, Sarah.
Yeah, a female guard.
Okay.
And the sources indicate she was quite good at it.
Oh, wow.
She even earns praise from her superiors, which is, unsettling considering what that good entailed.
It's,
Yeah.
it's hard to even grasp.
Yeah.
And her personal life remained pretty tumultuous even during this time.
Okay.
She went to visit her father,
Mhm.
actually in her SS uniform,
Oh, really?
maybe seeking some sort of approval.
Oh, wow.
But the visit ended very badly.
Oh, no.
Yeah, her stepsister even accused her of cruelty towards a doll,
Towards a doll.
which now seems like such an eerie foreshadowing
Yeah.
of things to come.
Yeah, that's a little creepy.
Yeah, and her own father, horrified by what she had become, reportedly even struck her.
So even as she's embracing this brutal regime, her family ties are fracturing even further.
Exactly. This last visit with her father essentially severed those ties completely, and Grese returned to Ravensbrück,
Okay.
potentially even more isolated and hardened by the experience.
It's tragic,
It is.
She's surrounded by this violence and dehumanization, and it seems like she's losing any remaining connection to her humanity.
And then in 1943, she's transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Auschwitz.
This is where her infamy really takes hold.
Right.
And the stories from survivors of Auschwitz paint a really horrifying picture.
Yeah.
Nina Koleska, a survivor, described Grese as being strikingly beautiful, almost angelic,
Really?
but possessing a cruelty that defied her appearance.
There's that duality again.
Yeah.
Beauty juxtaposed with just unimaginable violence.
It's so jarring.
It is.
Well, good contrast.
Yeah, and it makes her actions even more disturbing, I think, because you just don't expect it from someone who looks like that.
Right, and it makes you wonder what was going on in her mind.
Absolutely, yeah.
How could someone who appeared so normal be capable of such horrific acts?
It's the question that continues to fascinate and I think horrify us.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, it really does make you question, how someone could appear so normal yet harbor such darkness inside.
It's that inability to easily categorize her. I think that makes her so fascinating and so horrifying.
Absolutely.
But let's delve a little deeper into what life was actually like at Auschwitz under Grese's watch.
Okay.
We know that she was directly involved in the selection process.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine for a moment that you're a prisoner arriving at Auschwitz. You've been ripped from your home, separated from your loved ones, and herded onto a train under just horrific conditions.
It already sounds like a nightmare.
And it's just the beginning. You arrive at this place, this sprawling complex of barracks and barbed wire. You're stripped of your possessions, your clothes, your identity, and then you're forced to stand naked before Grese and Joseph Mengele, the notorious angel of death.
Oh my God.
And they're the ones who decide your fate with just a flick of the wrist.
That moment, that selection must have been pure terror.
Absolutely. One survivor, Alice Kahana, she recalled the absolute dread that washed over the prisoners when Grese and Mengele appeared.
Yeah.
To them, these two figures represented the ultimate power over life and death.
It's chilling to think about the weight of that power and how casually they wielded it.
It really is.
And for those who weren't immediately sent to the gas chambers, life at Auschwitz was a constant struggle for survival.
Right. Every day was filled with hunger, exhaustion, and the ever-present threat of violence.
And Grese was right in the thick of it.
Oh, yeah. She was reveling in the control she had over these vulnerable people.
The sources describe her using a variety of methods to inflict pain.
Yeah.
She had this whip, specially covered in cellophane, so that the blood could be easily washed off.
It's a detail that I think really speaks volumes about her calculated cruelty.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about brute force. It was about maintaining a veneer of order and cleanliness, even amidst the horrors that she was inflicting.
It's almost more disturbing in a way. And it wasn't just the whip. She would set her dogs on prisoners, which she deliberately kept half-starved to make them more aggressive.
There are countless stories of prisoners being mauled by these dogs, their screams echoing through the camp as Grese looked on, seemingly amused by the spectacle.
And she would force prisoners to perform these grueling exercises, calling it sport, while she stood by, often impeccably dressed as if she was orchestrating some kind of perverse game.
Right. Another survivor, Gisela Pearl, a doctor at Auschwitz, she recounted how Grese would take a twisted pleasure in observing surgical pain.
Oh my God.
It seems her cruelty went beyond just physical punishment.
Yeah.
She wanted to break the prisoners' spirits to strip them of their dignity and their humanity.
It's truly monstrous, and we can't forget about the psychological torture, the constant fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge that your life could be snuffed out at any moment.
Right, it must have been a living hell.
And for those who dared to resist the punishments, were swift and brutal.
Yeah, there are accounts of prisoners attempting to escape driven by desperation, only to be captured and brought back, often subjected to even worse treatment as a warning to others.
So she's not just following orders at this point. She's actively participating in the horrors of Auschwitz, going above and beyond what was required of her.
It seems that way, and as the war began to turn against Germany, as Soviet forces started closing in on Auschwitz in 1945, Grese found herself at a crossroads.
Oh, okay.
She could have been transferred to another camp, perhaps tried to blend in to disappear.
Right.
But instead, she made a choice that reveals a lot about her mindset at this point.
What do you mean?
She chose to stay with her lover, Franz Wolfgang Hatzinger, an SS officer at Auschwitz.
Okay.
Even if it meant being transferred to Bergen-Belsen, a camp notorious for its horrific conditions.
So even as the Nazi regime is crumbling around her, her personal attachments, her loyalty to this twisted world take precedence over everything else.
Right. It's a decision that underscores just how deeply entrenched she was in this system of cruelty.
And Bergen-Belsen, if anything, was even more horrific than Auschwitz.
Yeah, imagine if you can't, arriving at this overcrowded camp where disease was rampant, where starvation was the norm, where thousands were dying every day from typhus and dysentery.
Oh,
It was
God.
a living nightmare.
And yet Grease the Beast of Belsen, as she became known, continued her reign of terror amidst this utter chaos and suffering.
Yeah, her actions at Bergen-Belsen are perhaps the most disturbing because they occurred against a backdrop of complete societal collapse.
Right.
It's as if her cruelty had become ingrained a reflex even as the world around her crumbled.
Let's talk about those final acts of cruelty. What did the sources say about her behavior at Bergen-Belsen?
Yeah, it's really hard to fathom how anyone could continue to be cruel in an environment like that, you know?
You'd think basic human decency, even self-preservation, would kick in at that point.
You really would. But survivor testimony paints a very different picture. One survivor, Safran, he testified that he saw Grease brutally beating a young girl with a riding crop just weeks before the camp was liberated.
It's like the brutality was just totally ingrained in her, a default response to the chaos all around her.
Yeah, and there's this other account, even more disturbing, I think, that kind of speaks to that on the very eve of liberation.
Uh-huh.
Grease reportedly smashed the heads of two sisters together for trying to eat discarded potato peels.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine that the world around her is literally falling apart. The Nazi regime is collapsing, and she's still focused on inflicting pain for the most, trivial of offenses.
It's almost beyond comprehension. But
Yeah.
then finally, on April 15th, 1945, British forces liberate Bergen-Belsen.
Right.
Greece, along with other SS personnel, is captured.
And the irony here, I think, is really striking.
Yeah.
These individuals who had inflicted so much suffering were now forced to confront the consequences of their actions.
Right.
British forces made Greece and the other guards bury the thousands of corpses that littered the camp, denying them proper food and protective clothing.
And it's such a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those who had so ruthlessly dehumanized others were now being forced to confront the stark reality of death and decay on such a massive scale.
Absolutely. Many of those former guards, including Greece's lover, Hatzinger, died from typhus within weeks of their capture.
Wow.
They essentially succumbed to the very conditions they had helped create.
It's a stark reminder that those who perpetrate violence are not immune to its consequences.
Right.
And for those who survive like Greece, a reckoning was at hand.
Absolutely. She stood trial at the Belsen trial, which began in September 1945.
Okay.
And her behavior during the proceedings is almost as fascinating as her actions in the camps.
What do you mean?
Well, there are accounts of her laughing during survivor testimonies,
Oh, wow.
displaying a chilling detachment from the horrors being described. She even giggled when Joseph Kramer's wife testified about her husband's mental anguish over the mass killings at Auschwitz.
It's as if she couldn't or wouldn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation, or maybe she was trying to protect her own psyche from the weight of her actions.
That's possible, I think. When confronted directly about her own cruelty, Grease often downplayed her actions or deflected blame.
Okay.
She admitted to beating prisoners, but she insisted she never killed anyone.
And she even said, and I'm quoting here, if prisoners had their faces slapped, it was their fault. If they were more intelligent, they obeyed orders.
Wow.
It's just astounding how she manages to twist her own brutality into some warped sense of logic.
It really speaks to the power of ideology and propaganda. You know, Greece, like many others in the Nazi regime, had been indoctrinated with a belief system that dehumanized entire groups of people, justifying their persecution and extermination.
And this is where the discussion gets really interesting for me,
Yeah.
because it forces us to confront the fact that this kind of evil, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere,
Right.
It festers in societies where intolerance and prejudice are allowed to flourish, where propaganda and fear-mongering replace critical thinking.
You're absolutely right. The Holocaust wasn't just about gas chambers and death camps. It was about the gradual erosion of human empathy, the systematic dehumanization of entire groups of people, and the silencing of dissenting voices.
And it's a chilling thought, but we can see echoes of those same patterns in the world today.
Sadly, you're right. We see it in the rise of extremist ideologies, the scapegoating of minorities, and the normalization of violence and aggression.
So what can we learn from Irma Grese's story?
Yeah,
How do we prevent such atrocities from happening again?
that's the essential question, isn't it?
It is.
And I think it starts with understanding the conditions that create individuals like Grease.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the dangers of unchecked hatred, of blind obedience to authority, and the insidious power of propaganda.
It's also about fostering empathy, encouraging critical thinking, and promoting tolerance and understanding.
Absolutely. We have a responsibility to remember the past, to learn from it, and to challenge those forces that seek to divide and dehumanize.
Irma Grese's story is a stark warning, but it's also a call to action. We must never forget the horrors of the Holocaust, and we must never allow such darkness to consume us again.
Well said. And that concludes our deep dive into the life and actions of Irma Grese. It's a heavy story, but I hope it's also a story that prompts you to think critically about the world around you, to challenge injustice wherever you see it, and to fight for a future where such atrocities are never repeated.
Tell us what you think about this episode. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.